If no one comes after you, does that mean you were never meant to belong? The words echoed through Emily Harper's mind long after the voices of her former pack disappeared behind the towering pine trees. She never looked back. There was nothing left to see except the place where her heart had been quietly broken before every pair of watching eyes. Only an hour earlier, beneath the ancient moonstone where generations of wolves had celebrated their mating ceremonies, the alpha of her pack had rejected her without hesitation. The silence that followed had been far crueler than the words themselves. No one stepped forward. No elder questioned the decision. No friend reached for her trembling hand. Emily simply lowered her eyes, accepted the small leather bag containing everything she still owned, and walked away while whispers drifted behind her like cold autumn wind. She had imagined countless endings to the dreams she carried since childhood, but none of them had included leaving alone. The mountain trail stretched endlessly before her as golden afternoon light filtered through towering evergreens. Every step carried her farther from the only home she had ever known. Her boots crunched softly across fallen pine needles while cool air brushed against her pale cheeks. She tightened the faded green cloak around her shoulders and continued climbing without allowing herself to cry. Tears would not change what had happened. They would only slow her feet. The farther she climbed, the quieter the world became. The sounds of the pack slowly disappeared until only birdsong, rustling leaves, and distant streams remained. Emily finally paused beside a narrow creek winding between smooth gray stones. She knelt carefully, cupped icy water into her hands, and watched her own reflection tremble across the surface. She hardly recognized the young Omega staring back. Her auburn hair had slipped loose from its braid during the long walk. Her hazel eyes looked tired, yet somewhere beneath the sadness remained the same quiet determination she had carried since she was a little girl, helping injured birds return to the sky. She took a slow breath before whispering to herself, "You survived today. Tomorrow can wait until tomorrow arrives." The simple sentence steadied her heartbeat. She rose again and continued deeper into the mountains. As evening approached, enormous cliffs surrounded the narrow valley ahead. Wildflowers still bloomed between scattered rocks despite the approaching winter, while tall pines shielded the valley from harsh northern winds. Emily stopped at the entrance to a small clearing where an abandoned shepherd's shelter leaned beneath a rocky overhang. The wooden walls were weathered, and part of the roof had collapsed years earlier, yet the little cabin still offered protection from rain and snow. She stepped inside cautiously. Dust floated through narrow beams of fading sunlight. An old stone fireplace remained intact. Someone had left behind a rough wooden chair, a broken shelf, and a rusted kettle. To anyone else, it might have looked forgotten. To Emily, it looked like another chance. She smiled for the first time that day. After gathering fallen branches and dry pine needles, she carefully built a small fire inside the fireplace. Orange flames flickered gently across the stone walls, filling the tiny shelter with comforting warmth. She unpacked her few belongings: 2 blankets, a loaf of bread, a small knife, several dried herbs, a worn journal, and the silver pendant her mother had given her before passing away many years earlier. Emily wrapped both hands around the pendant for a brief moment. "I hope you would still be proud of me," she whispered softly. Outside, twilight settled across the mountains as countless stars slowly appeared overhead. A cool breeze carried the clean scent of pine, wild sage, and distant snowfields. Somewhere beyond the dark forest, a lone wolf howled beneath the rising moon. Emily listened quietly, no longer hearing loneliness inside the sound. Instead, she heard freedom. No one here expected her to become someone she was not. No one measured her worth by whether another wolf had accepted or rejected her. For the first time in many years, the mountains offered something her own pack never had: silence without judgment. As she drifted toward sleep beside the gentle fire, she never noticed that the evening wind carried her natural omega scent far beyond the valley, weaving through ancient forests and across distant ridgelines toward a traveler whose instincts had never once been wrong. Morning sunlight slowly spilled across the mountain valley, painting the towering cliffs with soft shades of gold, while a cool breeze carried the fresh scent of pine and wildflowers through the little shelter Emily now called home. She woke before sunrise out of habit, quietly folding her blankets before stepping outside into the crisp autumn air. Thin wisps of mist drifted above the nearby stream, and every breath reminded her how different this place felt from the crowded pack she had left behind. No voices judged her here. No whispered conversations followed her every step. The mountains asked nothing except that she respect their quiet rhythm. Emily knelt beside the clear water, washed her face, and smiled faintly as the icy current chased away the last traces of yesterday's sadness. She gathered fallen branches for firewood before walking farther into the forest carrying a woven basket she had repaired with strips of old cloth. The woods rewarded patient eyes. Wild mushrooms hid beneath fallen leaves. Late blueberries still clung to shaded bushes. Fragrant herbs grew between smooth stones warmed by the morning sun. Her mother had taught her long ago which plants soothed fevers, eased coughs, or helped tired muscles recover after long journeys. Those lessons now became the difference between merely surviving and truly living. As the hours passed, Emily slowly transformed the abandoned shelter into a place filled with quiet comfort. She repaired broken sections of the roof using fallen branches and thick moss gathered from nearby rocks. She swept years of dust from the wooden floor and placed fresh pine boughs beneath her blankets to soften the hard surface. She arranged bundles of drying herbs above the stone fireplace until the tiny cabin carried the comforting scent of cedar, lavender, and sage. Looking around the little room, she realized something unexpected. This place had never known her before today, yet somehow it welcomed her more warmly than the home she had spent her entire life trying to earn. Later that afternoon, while gathering fresh water from the stream, Emily heard a faint whimper drifting through the trees. She immediately followed the sound until she found a small wolf pup resting beneath a fallen log. The frightened little animal had one paw caught between two loose branches and looked exhausted after struggling for hours. Emily approached slowly, speaking in the same calm voice she had once used to comfort injured birds and frightened deer. "You are all right now. I am not here to hurt you." The pup stopped trembling as she carefully lifted the branches away. After gently checking the small paw, she discovered it was only lightly strained rather than seriously injured. She wrapped it with soft strips torn from an old linen cloth before offering the pup a little water from her hands. The tiny wolf licked her fingers gratefully before following her all the way back to the cabin. Emily laughed quietly. "I suppose you have decided where you live now." The pup wagged its tail before curling beside the fireplace as though it had always belonged there. As evening approached, Emily shared the last piece of fresh bread she carried with her unexpected companion before preparing simple vegetable soup flavored with mountain herbs. She never once considered keeping all the food for herself. Somehow sharing the meal made it taste even better. Outside, the forest settled into peaceful silence while stars gradually filled the darkening sky above the mountains. Far beyond the valley, nearly 30 miles away along the northern border of the kingdom, Alpha King Alexander Blackwood guided his horse across a narrow mountain ridge accompanied by several royal guards riding at a respectful distance behind him. They had spent 3 days inspecting remote villages before beginning the journey home. Alexander suddenly raised one hand, signaling the escort to stop. His horse stood perfectly still. A gentle breeze drifted across the ridge carrying countless familiar woodland scents. Pine, cedar, cold stone, autumn leaves. Then another fragrance reached him unlike anything he had ever experienced. It was soft yet unmistakable, carrying warmth, quiet strength, and an unfamiliar sense of peace that caused every instinct within him to awaken at once. Alexander slowly closed his eyes as the mountain wind brushed across his face. He had traveled throughout the kingdom for years, yet no scent had ever lingered in his memory after a single breath. This one refused to disappear. It seemed almost alive, moving with the wind as though inviting him deeper into the mountains. One of the royal guards noticed the Alpha King's thoughtful expression. "Your Majesty, is something wrong?" Alexander opened his eyes without looking away from the distant forest stretching across the horizon. A calm smile touched his face for reasons he could not yet explain. "No," he answered quietly. "Something has finally been found." Alexander Blackwood rarely ignored his instincts. Years of leading the kingdom had taught him that reason guided decisions, but instinct often revealed truths long before the mind understood them. As the cool mountain breeze continued flowing across the northern ridge, that unfamiliar scent remained woven among the fragrance of pine, cedar, and fresh snow. It was gentle yet unwavering, carrying a quiet warmth unlike anything he had encountered before. One of the royal guards guided his horse closer. "Your Majesty, should we continue toward the capital before nightfall?" Alexander remained silent for a moment, his silver-gray eyes fixed on the endless mountain range stretching toward the horizon. Finally he answered, "We will remain in the Northern Territory one more day." None of the guards questioned his decision. They simply adjusted their course without hesitation. As the royal escort disappeared among towering evergreens, Alexander found himself glancing toward the distant valleys more often than the maps in his hands. Something beyond those forests had captured his attention in a way no battlefield, council meeting, or royal ceremony ever had. Several miles away, Emily had begun settling into a peaceful routine that slowly transformed survival into ordinary life. Each morning, she gathered fresh water from the stream before tending the herbs drying beside the fireplace. The little wolf pup she had rescued now followed her everywhere, happily exploring the clearing while occasionally chasing butterflies drifting through patches of late autumn flowers. Emily smiled every time the tiny animal bounded clumsily through the tall grass before returning proudly, with nothing more than a colorful leaf held gently between its teeth. She named the playful companion Ash because of the soft gray markings across its back. The name seemed to fit perfectly. During the afternoon, she repaired another section of the cabin roof before walking farther into the forest searching for medicinal roots growing beneath shaded rocks. Along the way, she discovered an injured golden eagle resting beneath a fallen tree. One wing drooped awkwardly, preventing the magnificent bird from taking flight. Emily approached slowly. Speaking with the same patient calm, she offered every frightened creature she encountered. The eagle watched her carefully, but did not attempt to escape. After examining the wing, Emily realized it was strained rather than broken. She carefully wrapped it with clean linen before placing fresh water nearby. "You will fly again," she whispered with quiet confidence. "You simply need time." As she walked back toward the cabin, she never noticed another pair of eyes observing the scene from high above. Hidden among the branches of an ancient pine, a large silver wolf stood perfectly still upon a rocky ledge overlooking the valley. Alexander had continued alone after instructing his guards to establish camp farther down the mountain. He had followed the mysterious scent through winding trails until it led him to this peaceful clearing. From the safety of the trees, he watched the young Omega move through the forest with remarkable gentleness. She expected no audience. She believed herself completely alone. Yet every action revealed the same quiet compassion. She shared water with the eagle before drinking herself. She laughed softly when the little wolf pup playfully tugged at the edge of her cloak. She thanked the forest for providing herbs as though nature itself were an old friend. Alexander remained hidden. Something inside him insisted that interrupting such peaceful moments would somehow diminish them. Instead, he quietly observed while the mountain breeze carried her scent through the trees once more. It felt strangely familiar despite the fact they had never met. As evening settled across the valley, Emily prepared simple vegetable stew over the fireplace, while Ash slept peacefully near the warmth of the flames. Outside, gentle snowflakes began drifting from the darkening sky, covering the clearing with a delicate white blanket. Emily stepped outside, holding her worn silver pendant between both hands before looking toward the stars slowly appearing beyond the clouds. "Thank you," she whispered softly, although she was no longer certain whether she spoke to the mountains, to the moon above, or to her mother's memory. "I think I am finally beginning to heal." Hidden beyond the edge of the clearing, Alexander quietly heard the gratitude in her voice without hearing the words themselves. He understood only the feeling they carried. For the first time in many years, the Alpha King chose not to announce his presence, not because he feared being recognized, but because some part of him believed the woman standing beneath the falling snow deserved one more peaceful night before destiny gently stepped into her life. The snowfall grew heavier throughout the night, covering the narrow mountain paths beneath a blanket of fresh white powder, while icy wind swept gently through the towering pines surrounding Emily's small cabin. She woke before dawn to the sound of Ash scratching softly at the wooden door. The little wolf pup seemed unusually restless, pacing in small circles before stopping to look toward the forest as though sensing something hidden beyond the trees. Emily wrapped her green cloak tightly around her shoulders and stepped outside carrying a lantern. Snowflakes drifted quietly through the pale morning light, transforming the valley into a world of silver and white. She smiled despite the cold. The mountains looked more beautiful than ever beneath winter's first embrace. After feeding Ash and placing fresh herbs above the fireplace to continue drying, Emily followed a familiar trail leading toward the stream. Along the way, she noticed fresh animal tracks crossing the snow, but nothing seemed unusual. Deer often wandered through the valley searching for water before sunrise. As she knelt beside the icy creek filling her wooden bucket, another gentle sound reached her ears. A soft whine drifted from behind a cluster of snow-covered bushes. Emily carefully walked toward it and found a young mountain fox curled beneath a fallen branch, shivering from the cold after becoming trapped by heavy snow. Without hesitation, she carefully cleared the loose branches away and wrapped the frightened little animal inside her cloak. "You have had quite an adventure," she whispered warmly. "Let us get you somewhere safe." The fox relaxed almost immediately, sensing the kindness in her calm voice. Emily carried it back to the cabin, where she prepared a small bed of blankets beside the fireplace. Ash watched curiously before settling beside the newcomer, as though welcoming another guest into their unusual little family. Emily laughed quietly at the sight. "You really do believe everyone belongs here." Hours later, the storm began strengthening. Thick clouds swallowed the afternoon sunlight while powerful winds swept through the valley, bending pine branches beneath growing layers of snow. Emily checked the cabin roof one final time before securing the wooden shutters. The little shelter remained sturdy, yet she knew the mountains could become dangerous during severe weather. She added more firewood to the fireplace and quietly hoped the storm would pass before nightfall. High above the valley, Alexander stood beneath a massive pine tree overlooking the narrow trail leading toward Emily's cabin. His dark traveling cloak moved gently in the wind while snow gathered across his shoulders. He had remained hidden for several days, watching only from a respectful distance. Every sunrise confirmed what his instincts had already begun telling him. Emily's kindness never depended upon comfort. Whether she cared for an injured eagle, rescued a frightened fox, or shared food with a hungry wolf pup, she acted without expecting anyone to notice. The mountain itself seemed calmer wherever she walked. One of the royal guards finally reached Alexander after carefully climbing the snowy ridge. "Your Majesty, the storm is becoming dangerous. We should begin returning to the capital before the mountain passes close." Alexander slowly looked toward the valley below, where a thin ribbon of smoke rose gently from Emily's chimney into the gray winter sky. "You may return with the others," he answered quietly. The guard looked surprised. "Your Majesty?" Alexander smiled faintly without taking his eyes from the distant cabin. "I will remain here one more night." The guard respectfully bowed before leaving without another question. Twilight settled quickly across the mountains as powerful winds continued sweeping through the forest. Inside the cabin, Emily placed another log onto the fire before sitting beside the flames, with Ash sleeping peacefully across her feet and the rescued fox resting comfortably nearby. The warm glow of the fireplace filled the little room with quiet peace despite the storm outside. Suddenly, a powerful gust of wind struck the cabin, forcing the front door open before Emily could reach it. Snow swirled across the wooden floor while freezing air rushed inside. She hurried forward, struggling to pull the heavy door closed against the growing wind. Before she could secure it completely, a tall figure emerged through the curtain of falling snow. A stranger wearing a dark winter cloak stood just beyond the doorway, his silver hair dusted with snowflakes and calm gray eyes meeting hers with quiet respect rather than fear. Emily instinctively stepped back in surprise, while the traveler lowered his head politely and spoke with a gentle voice that somehow felt reassuring despite the storm surrounding them. "Forgive the unexpected visit," he said. "The mountain convinced me that I should not spend this night alone." Emily stood quietly for only a heartbeat before gently pulling the cabin door wider. The storm outside had become fierce enough that refusing shelter was never an option she would consider. "Please come inside before the cold follows you," she said warmly. The stranger stepped into the small cabin, carefully brushing snow from his dark cloak before closing the heavy wooden door behind him. Almost instantly, the roaring wind faded, replaced once again by the comforting crackle of the fireplace. Ash lifted his head from the blanket beside the fire and cautiously watched the newcomer for a few seconds before slowly wagging his tail. The rescued mountain fox remained curled peacefully near the warmth, showing no sign of fear. Emily smiled faintly. They usually know when someone means no harm. The traveler glanced toward the two animals with quiet admiration. Then I should feel honored they accepted me so quickly. Emily nodded toward the fire. Please warm yourself. He removed his gloves and settled onto the old wooden chair near the stone fireplace, while orange light reflected softly across his silver hair. Emily noticed how calm he seemed despite arriving through one of the strongest snowstorms she had ever witnessed. There was confidence in the way he carried himself, yet none of the arrogance she had often seen among powerful alphas. She poured steaming herbal tea into 2 simple clay cups before handing one to him. It is made with mountain sage and cedar leaves, she explained. It helps after long hours in the cold. He accepted it with genuine gratitude. Thank you. After taking one careful sip, his expression softened with pleasant surprise. This is remarkable. Emily laughed quietly. Most people only say that because they are cold. He smiled. I am saying it because it is true. The warmth of the little cabin gradually eased the silence between them. Outside, snow continued falling against the wooden walls while inside the fire painted gentle shadows across shelves filled with drying herbs and carefully stacked firewood. The traveler looked around with quiet curiosity. Did you build all of this yourself? Emily nodded. Most of it. The cabin was already here, but it needed many repairs. His eyes rested upon the neatly organized bundles of herbs hanging above the fireplace. You have done far more than repair it. You turned it into a home. Emily looked around the small room as though seeing it through someone else's eyes for the first time. I suppose I did. After a brief silence, she added, It feels strange. I spent years searching for a place where I belonged. I found it only after everyone stopped looking for me. The traveler listened without interrupting. There was no curiosity driven by gossip in his expression, only sincere attention. Emily appreciated that more than she expected. She handed him a simple bowl of vegetable stew flavored with herbs gathered that very morning. It is not much, she said apologetically. He accepted it with a grateful smile. A meal shared with kindness is never small. They ate quietly while the storm continued outside. Ash eventually wandered over and rested beside the stranger's boots, earning a gentle scratch behind the ears. Emily watched with surprise. He usually takes much longer before trusting someone. The traveler smiled without looking away from the little wolf pup. Perhaps he recognizes that we both found shelter here tonight. Emily could not explain why those words lingered in her heart. They sounded simple, yet they carried a quiet understanding she had not expected from a stranger. Later, as the fire burned lower, she unfolded an extra blanket and placed it across the wooden chair. You should stay until morning, she said. The mountain trails will not be safe before sunrise. He inclined his head respectfully. I appreciate your generosity more than you know. Emily smiled. Out here we help whoever arrives at the door. Tomorrow the mountain might ask someone else to help me. The traveler looked at her thoughtfully for several silent seconds before asking, Do you ever miss the life you left behind? Emily stared into the dancing flames. She considered the question carefully instead of answering too quickly. I miss the people I hoped they could become, she admitted softly. But I do not miss pretending that I belonged somewhere I was never truly accepted. The room fell quiet again except for the gentle crackling of burning wood. The traveler understood those words more deeply than she realized. He had spent years surrounded by people who respected his crown before knowing the man beneath it. She had lived among people who judged her before recognizing the kindness within her. Their paths had been different, yet loneliness had visited them both. As midnight approached, the storm slowly began losing its strength. Moonlight slipped through a narrow gap between the shutters, filling the little cabin with a soft silver glow. The gentle breeze carried Emily's natural scent through the room once more, and for a single breathtaking moment something ancient stirred quietly inside Alexander's heart. He did not fully understand why every instinct suddenly urged him to remain beside the woman sitting across the fire. He only knew that no journey of his life had ever felt more certain than the one that had led him to this forgotten cabin hidden among the mountains. The storm finally drifted beyond the mountains before dawn, leaving the valley wrapped in peaceful silence beneath a blanket of untouched snow. Soft morning light filtered through the cabin window, painting golden patterns across the wooden floor while the last glowing embers rested quietly inside the stone fireplace. Emily awoke first, adding fresh logs to the fire before quietly preparing another pot of herbal tea. The comforting scent of sage, cedar, and wild mint slowly filled the little cabin. When the traveler opened his eyes a few moments later, he smiled with quiet gratitude. "You begin every morning with kindness," he observed. Emily laughed softly while handing him a warm cup. "It makes difficult days feel smaller." They shared a simple breakfast of fresh bread, dried berries, and warm soup before stepping outside together. The storm had transformed the valley into a breathtaking landscape where every pine branch shimmered beneath fresh snow and every mountain peak reflected the pale blue morning sky. Ash bounded happily through the snow while the rescued fox cautiously emerged from the cabin doorway before disappearing into the forest, fully recovered. Emily watched the little animal vanish between the trees with a peaceful smile. "That is exactly how it should be," she whispered. The traveler looked at her curiously. "You are not disappointed that it left?" She gently shook her head. Helping someone does not mean asking them to stay. Sometimes love simply means giving another life the chance to continue. Her answer settled quietly within him. Throughout his years as Alpha King, he had listened to countless speeches about leadership, loyalty, and duty. Yet no lesson had ever sounded as honest as the simple wisdom spoken by the young Omega standing beside him. They spent the morning repairing a section of the cabin roof, where heavy snow had loosened several wooden beams. The traveler worked with surprising skill, lifting weathered timbers into place, while Emily secured fresh rope and branches gathered from the surrounding forest. They spoke easily as though they had known each other far longer than a single evening. Emily shared stories about learning herbs from her mother, while the traveler described distant villages hidden among mountains without mentioning the royal journeys that had taken him there. Every conversation revealed another quiet piece of who they truly were beneath the lives they had lived. As the afternoon sun climbed higher, Emily led him toward a rocky overlook where the entire valley stretched beneath them. Crystal streams wound through evergreen forests while snow sparkled across the cliffs like scattered diamonds. The mountain air carried only peace. They stood together without speaking for several moments until a gentle breeze drifted between them once again. This time the unfamiliar fragrance surrounding Emily seemed richer than before, warmed by sunlight and softened by the clean scent of winter pines. The moment Alexander breathed it in, something ancient awakened deep within him. His heartbeat slowed instead of racing. Every instinct became perfectly clear. The mountain, the storm, the unexpected shelter, every step of his journey suddenly formed a single path leading to the woman standing quietly beside him. He lowered his eyes briefly, understanding what his heart had already accepted before his mind found the words. She was his fated mate. Emily noticed the thoughtful expression crossing his face. "Are you all right?" she asked gently. Alexander looked at her with calm warmth. "I think I finally understand why the mountains wanted me to come here." Emily smiled, assuming he meant the beautiful scenery surrounding them. "They have a way of helping people find what they need." Alexander quietly answered, "They certainly do." Before either of them could continue, the distant sound of horses echoed across the frozen valley. Emily turned toward the narrow trail winding between the pines. Moments later, several mounted riders wearing elegant silver cloaks emerged from the forest below. Their disciplined formation immediately distinguished them from ordinary travelers. They guided their horses toward the cabin before stopping at the edge of the clearing. The captain quickly dismounted and approached with unmistakable urgency. The instant he reached the traveler, he lowered one knee into the snow while every royal guard behind him followed without hesitation. "Your Majesty," the captain said respectfully, "the council has searched for you since yesterday morning." Emily stood perfectly still. Her eyes slowly moved from the kneeling guards to the man she had welcomed into her cabin, shared her meals with, and trusted as nothing more than a thoughtful stranger seeking shelter from the storm. Alexander looked at her with quiet regret, knowing the peaceful simplicity of the last day had reached its inevitable end. He had hoped for one more ordinary hour before the truth arrived. Instead, beneath the silent mountains that had first brought them together, the secret he had carried so naturally disappeared with a single respectful greeting, leaving Emily face to face with the realization that the traveler she had treated with simple kindness was the alpha king of the entire kingdom. Emily remained motionless as the royal guards knelt in the snow before the man she had welcomed into her little cabin only hours earlier. The mountain breeze carried quiet silence across the valley while countless snowflakes sparkled beneath the afternoon sun. For a long moment, no one spoke. Emily looked from the respectful soldiers to Alexander, searching his calm gray eyes for the same traveler who had shared warm tea, repaired her roof, and laughed softly when Ash chased snowflakes through the clearing. She found him there unchanged. Only now she also saw the quiet authority she had somehow overlooked. Alexander stepped toward her before gently raising one hand toward the captain. "Please rise," he said calmly. The guards immediately obeyed. He turned back to Emily with unmistakable sincerity. "I owe you the truth." Emily lowered her eyes briefly before meeting his gaze once more. "You are the Alpha King." He nodded once. "I am." She remained silent for several seconds, not because she felt betrayed, but because she needed time to place together two completely different images of the same man. The traveler who had accepted simple soup with genuine gratitude. The ruler before whom an entire kingdom bowed. Somehow both were equally real. Alexander spoke quietly. "I never intended to deceive you. When I arrived, the storm mattered more than my title. After that, every conversation we shared became the first honest conversations I have enjoyed in a very long time. I wanted one day where I could simply be myself." Emily studied his face carefully before a gentle smile slowly returned. "Then I suppose we were both hiding something." He looked at her curiously. "You never told me why you came to these mountains." Emily glanced toward the small cabin standing peacefully beneath the cliffs. "Because I believed no one would ever come looking for me." The honesty in her voice settled deeply within Alexander's heart. He understood now why every quiet act of kindness she had shown carried such quiet strength. She had continued choosing compassion even after believing she no longer belonged anywhere. Before he could answer, Ash happily bounded through the snow and stopped between them, wagging his tail as though nothing remarkable had happened. Emily laughed softly and knelt to rub behind the little wolf pup's ears. Alexander smiled. "He seems determined to remind us that life continues." Emily nodded. Animals rarely care about crowns. Several guards exchanged faint smiles before respectfully looking away. Captain Rowan Mercer stepped forward once more. "Your Majesty, the Council requests your immediate return. Representatives from the Eastern Territories have already arrived at the capital." Alexander acknowledged the message with a slight nod, but did not immediately move. Instead, he looked toward Emily. "Would you allow me to ask one question?" She nodded. "Of course. If the mountains had never brought me here, would you have remained alone?" Emily considered the question carefully. "I would have remained here until I learned how to smile, without remembering the people who rejected me." Alexander quietly absorbed every word. His instincts had already recognized her as his fated mate beneath the morning sunlight. Now his heart understood why destiny had chosen her. She did not search for revenge. She searched for peace. The gentle breeze drifted through the valley once again, carrying Emily's natural scent across the snow. This time Alexander no longer questioned what it meant. The ancient bond resting within every alpha became unmistakably clear. He took one slow step closer, careful not to overwhelm her. "Emily," he said softly. She looked into his silver-gray eyes. "There is something I have only experienced once in my life, and it happened the moment the wind carried your scent to me across these mountains. I did not understand it then. I understand it now." Emily listened quietly, her heartbeat steady despite the growing emotion in his voice. "Among our people," Alexander continued, "there are rare moments when destiny recognizes two souls before they recognize each other. I believe that is what brought me here." Emily lowered her eyes for only a moment before asking the question resting gently within her heart. "Are you saying the mountains did not lead you here by accident?" Alexander smiled with calm certainty. "No, I believe they led me home." Neither of them moved. The words themselves carried enough weight. Around them, the royal guards remained respectfully silent, sensing that something far greater than a royal conversation had just unfolded beneath the quiet mountain sky. Emily looked back toward the little cabin where she had believed her story would end in peaceful solitude. Instead, every path she had walked since leaving her former pack suddenly appeared connected by an invisible thread leading to this single moment. She had climbed into the mountains believing she had been abandoned. Yet standing before the Alpha King beneath the clear winter sky, she slowly realized she had never been walking away from destiny at all. She had been walking toward it. The journey from the mountains to the capital took 2 peaceful days beneath clear winter skies. Yet to Emily it felt as though every mile carried her farther from the quiet life she had only just begun to rebuild. Alexander never rushed her. They traveled side by side along winding forest roads while the royal guards followed at a respectful distance, allowing long stretches of comfortable silence whenever words were unnecessary. Ash happily trotted beside Emily's horse, refusing to leave her side even when the guards offered to carry the energetic little wolf pup. Whenever they stopped to rest, Alexander chose simple campsites instead of nearby estates, sharing warm meals around modest campfires much as they had inside the mountain cabin. Emily slowly realized that although the world treated him as a king, he never expected those around him to forget they were simply people first. On the morning of the 3rd day, the great stone walls of Blackwood Keep appeared above the rolling hills, their silver banners rising proudly against the pale blue sky. Beyond the castle stretched the capital city where merchants welcomed travelers, children laughed through busy streets, and church bells echoed gently across snow-covered rooftops. Emily had imagined that entering the royal city would feel overwhelming. Yet what surprised her most was not its size, but the warmth of the people greeting Alexander along the roads. Farmers, shopkeepers, and craftsmen smiled genuinely as he passed, and he answered each greeting with the same quiet respect he had shown her beside the fire. Before they reached the castle gates, another group waited beside the road. Emily recognized several familiar faces immediately. They belonged to the very pack she had left behind only days earlier. News of the Alpha King's return had spread quickly, and her former Alpha, accompanied by elders and several pack members, had come hoping to welcome the ruler with proper ceremony. The moment their eyes fell upon Emily riding beside Alexander, complete silence settled over the gathering. The Alpha who had rejected her stared in disbelief, unable to understand why the Omega he had dismissed now traveled beside the Alpha King himself. Whispers quietly spread through the crowd. Some lowered their eyes in embarrassment. Others simply stood frozen as though questioning everything they believed they knew. Emily felt old memories briefly stir within her heart, but they no longer carried the same weight. The mountains had already begun healing wounds that once seemed impossible to mend. Alexander gently guided his horse to a stop. He climbed down first before offering Emily his hand with the same quiet courtesy he had shown since the night of the storm. She accepted without hesitation. Her former Alpha finally stepped forward and respectfully bowed. "Your Majesty," he said carefully, "we did not know Miss Harper had traveled under your protection." Alexander's calm expression never changed. "She does not travel under my protection because she needs permission to exist," he replied quietly. "She travels beside me because I asked her to." The simple sentence settled over the gathering more powerfully than any raised voice ever could. No accusation followed. No humiliation was returned. Only truth. Emily looked at the people who had once been her entire world. For the first time, she did not feel anger. She felt freedom. One elderly pack healer slowly approached with tears in her eyes. She had often shown Emily quiet kindness when few others had noticed. "Child," the older woman whispered gently, "I hoped the mountains would be kind to you." Emily smiled warmly before embracing her. "They were kinder than I ever imagined." The healer returned the smile through grateful tears. Alexander watched quietly, understanding that healing rarely came from revenge. It came from choosing peace when bitterness seemed easier. Emily's former Alpha lowered his head. "I made a mistake," he admitted honestly. "I judged what I failed to understand." Emily met his eyes with calm sincerity. "Then let today become the beginning of wiser choices." There was no pride in her voice and no desire to make him suffer. Only quiet grace. Even the royal guard standing nearby exchanged respectful glances, recognizing that true strength often appeared in forgiveness rather than victory. As the castle gates slowly opened, the sound of silver trumpets echoed across the capital. Noble families gathered along the grand courtyard expecting to welcome their king, But many paused in surprise as Alexander chose not to walk ahead alone. Instead, he remained beside Emily as they entered together beneath the ancient stone archway. The winter sun broke through drifting clouds, bathing the courtyard in warm golden light, while countless eyes followed the quiet Omega, whose kindness had first been discovered not inside a palace, but in a forgotten cabin hidden among the mountains. Emily looked once toward the distant peaks barely visible beyond the horizon and silently thanked them for sheltering her when she believed she had nowhere left to belong. Only now did she fully understand that the path leading away from rejection had never ended in loneliness. It had been quietly guiding her toward the place where her heart had always been meant to stand. The days that followed unfolded with a quiet peace unlike anything Emily had ever known. Blackwood Keep remained every bit as magnificent as the stories travelers once shared, yet behind its towering stone walls, she discovered something even more remarkable. No one demanded that she become someone else. Alexander never asked her to abandon the kindness that had carried her through loneliness. Instead, he encouraged it. On her first morning at the castle, she wandered through the royal gardens where neglected patches of medicinal herbs struggled beneath the winter frost. With permission from the royal gardeners, she began restoring them one small section at a time. Castle servants soon joined her, curious to learn the healing remedies she had inherited from her mother. Before long, the forgotten garden became a place where guards, workers, children, and travelers gathered not because of royal command, but because they felt welcome there. Alexander often visited quietly after finishing meetings with the council. Rather than interrupting, he watched Emily patiently explain the uses of each herb, while Ash happily wandered among laughing children who eagerly tossed small pine cones for the playful wolf pup to chase. One afternoon, the oldest member of the royal council approached Alexander with thoughtful eyes. "Your Majesty," the elderly advisor said, "the castle has changed." Alexander glanced toward the garden where Emily knelt beside a frightened child, helping him replant a tiny lavender seedling. "Yes," he answered softly. "It has finally remembered why it exists." The advisor smiled with quiet understanding. Weeks later, representatives from every northern pack gathered inside the Great Hall for the annual Winter Assembly. Noble families, village elders, healers, and alpha leaders filled the magnificent chamber beneath crystal chandeliers and towering stained glass windows. Emily stood near the front wearing an elegant forest green gown inspired by the simple dress she had once worn in the mountains. Although the fabric was finer, nothing about her gentle smile had changed. Alexander stepped onto the raised platform before the gathered assembly. The hall gradually fell silent. "Many of you have heard different versions of how Miss Emily Harper arrived at Blackwood Keep," he began calmly. "Today I wish to tell you only one truth." Every eye turned toward him. When others measured her value by rejection, she continued choosing kindness. When she believed no one would ever search for her, she built a home where injured creatures found safety and strangers received warmth without question. Before anyone knew who I was, she welcomed me with nothing more than compassion. That is the strength worthy of this kingdom. His words settled gently across the hall. No applause interrupted them. Their quiet honesty required none. Alexander descended from the platform and walked toward Emily. Stopping before her, he looked into her hazel eyes with the same calm certainty she had first seen beside the fire inside the mountain cabin. "Emily Harper," he said warmly, "the mountains carried your scent to me, but it was your heart that led me home. Before our people and before the moon that watches over every pack, I ask you to stand beside me, not because destiny alone chose us, but because every choice you have made since the day we met has confirmed what destiny already knew." Emily felt tears gather gently in her eyes, not from sadness, but from gratitude. She remembered the lonely trail leading into the mountains, the abandoned cabin, the first snowfall, the quiet traveler who had accepted a simple bowl of soup as though it were a royal feast. She smiled through those memories before placing her hand in his. "I will stand beside you," she answered softly, "as long as we continue building a kingdom where no one has to earn kindness before receiving it." Warm applause gradually filled the great hall. It spread from the servants standing near the entrance to the noble families seated closest to the throne until every voice joined together in heartfelt celebration. Even the alpha who had once rejected Emily stood among the gathering with quiet respect, understanding that the greatest lesson of his life had arrived too late to change the past, but not too late to shape the future. As evening settled across Blackwood Keep, Alexander and Emily returned to the same mountain valley where their paths had first crossed. The little cabin still rested beneath the rocky cliffs, its chimney sending a gentle ribbon of smoke into the cool evening sky. They stepped inside together and found everything much as they had left it. The stone fireplace, the worn wooden chair, the shelves filled with fragrant herbs, and the peaceful silence that had first brought healing to two lonely hearts. Alexander smiled as he looked around the tiny room. Every journey I believed was leading me toward a throne was quietly leading me here instead. Emily gently squeezed his hand. Outside, the wind drifted through the towering pines, carrying the familiar scent that had once crossed the mountains in search of the Alpha King. This time it carried something more. Not loneliness, not loss, only the quiet promise that sometimes the path that feels most like an ending is simply the beginning of the place where the heart has always belonged.